I'm back in our Blackboard shell, and I'm looking at the behavior change. I've clicked on behavior change plan. I'm in here looking at the link where you'll submit your final plan. I'm going to go ahead and open that now. I downloaded and reviewed the guidelines in the first part of this video, and now I'm going to go in and review the rubric with you. So if you go in and you look at view rubric, you will be able to determine how I'm going to be evaluating your performance on this assignment. You'll see that there's a row for each of those guideline components, and there's a description of what I'm expecting in each area. So if you look, the first thing you were going to do is give a general description of the problem and the purpose of the plan. You can see that there's a score for beginning, which means you're not hitting the target. To you're somewhat addressing what I'm asking you to address. You're doing that with some proficiency, so I can tell that you're applying the information provided in the course and you're including the majority of the required information, or there's an outstanding performance where you have provided substantive detail that is thorough, that is complete, and reflects a high level of understanding of that course content, right? So you've got a general description of the problem and the plan. You've got the description of your subject. If you looked in the guidelines, I gave you a number of things that you need to address in describing your student. If you don't address all of those things, then you're going to lose some points. If you do, and you do it thoroughly and well, then that'll be certainly a place where you should be able to get all of the points possible for that particular part of the guideline. You're going to describe the setting. And again, what I'm looking for is completeness. I would say that if you want to structure your project, it may help you to use subheadings for each of these components and then put in complete sentences and paragraphs the information to address the content required in each of those sections. Now, obviously, once you get to the point that you're doing like your description of your baseline data, you're going to need an ABC chart and you're going to need some sort of numeric representation. So that might be a place where you wouldn't use complete sentences and complete paragraphs. Setting is described, target behavior. Remember, we talked about the target behavior being defined so clearly that an independent observer could tell, is it occurring or is it not occurring? And then that description should provide also a rationale for why behavior change is needed. So, you know, obviously you're not going to have time as an educator to address each and every single small behavior challenge that every child has. And we all have some, right? But you're wanting to identify, if you're going to the point of putting together a plan like this, it needs to be something that's having a significant impact on that individual. Okay? And again, the rubric goes from giving you no credit because you did not address or poorly or inadequately defined the target behavior in a way that doesn't reflect what you've learned in the class, to you're getting full credit because you clearly defined it. Anybody could tell when it is or isn't happening. It provides a rationale for why behavior change is needed, and it clearly indicates that you've understood the information provided in the course. Baseline phase, I talked about pretty extensively. Again, what you're wanting to do is be able to very objectively describe when and under what circumstances that behavior occurs, and making sure that your ABC chart includes all of the required information. I think the hardest thing often for students and for teachers in the field is to describe a behavior without interpreting it. So remember that I've said before, do not use the word bad when describing behavior. You're wanting to look at, is this occurring, is it not? And I'm not making any judgments about it, okay? Lots of times, teachers will also throw out words like, that child is tantruming. Well, a tantrum may look very different from one individual to another, so you're wanting to describe that very concretely. The child flung themselves on the floor, was yelling, shoved desk, whatever it is, but it needs to be something concrete and something observable, right? And then in your ABC, I'm really looking for, can you target what occurred immediately before that behavior and immediately after. Okay, the behavior is what the child does, but you're not wanting to look at what happened right before, what happened right after. Okay. I spent quite a bit of time when I was going through the guidelines talking about the short-term objective. The critical thing here is that you make sure you're writing one sentence, that I have no difficulty identifying the condition, the behavior, and the criteria, and that objective aligns with what you're hoping to accomplish with that student, so that you know that if they meet that objective, they've made significant progress in terms of behavioral improvement. Again, the short-term objective drives your plan, so please make sure if you don't understand that you come and meet with me, or you set up a time to talk to me about it so we can be sure that you're on the right track. Then you're going to describe potential interventions to address, either to increase or decrease the target behavior. I want you to describe one in substantive detail, that's what you're planning to implement, but then I want you to also describe two others that you would implement if your first plan didn't work. And that may be doing something completely different, or it may be enhancing what you already did. So, phase one, I'm going to include a self-monitoring checklist. Phase two, I'm going to do a self-monitoring checklist, but the child's going to do check-in and out with the teacher with more frequency than they did in the first iteration of that plan. Okay? That would be an example. I want you to very clearly describe how you're going to monitor progress. And remember, I need to be able to compare what happened after intervention or during and after intervention with what happened before. So what you do at baseline should correlate with what you do in terms of progress monitoring. If you measure something completely different, I won't be able to really tell what kind of change there's been in that behavior. I am also, 15 of your 100 points comes from the quality of your writing. That means you're going through and you're proofreading very carefully. You're organizing your paper in a clear and concise and cohesive manner. That you are using person-first language and being very careful with how you are describing children and their behaviors. That you're adhering to the conventions of APA guidelines, so your references and your in-text citations follow that format. Okay? I want you to, if you are having difficulty or if you're not sure about your writing, please remember that CASA is there for you, and their tutors can help you to make sure that you're producing a product that you're going to be able to do well with. They can meet with you face-to-face. My understanding is they can also make arrangements to meet with you by phone or using other mechanisms if you're having problems getting there in person. One of the things that I do want to caution you about, and I'll go back and talk about this now, is also make sure that when you're doing your intervention, you're using resources and references to guide what you're developing. One thing I noticed with several of you on your classroom management plans, and I did comment on this, is you're wanting to use one of those charts that teachers have where they either put cards with different colors that they flip based on the child's behavior, or they have clothespins that they move up and down a stick, and you're either in the red zone, which usually means, there's been a lot of inappropriate behavior, in the green zone where the behavior is appropriate. Those are really ineffective mechanisms for addressing behavior concerns. And so I want you to think about this. You would never, ever post every child's grade on a wall that everyone can see. But when you do that with a behavior challenge, that's actually what you're doing. You're basically revealing, this is how all these children are performing, and you're sharing that with anyone who comes in and out of the classroom and all of those children. And if you notice, if you've ever been in a classroom where those systems in place, it tends to be the same children who are scoring, or their clip stays on green, and it's the same child every day whose clip moves to orange or red. So what that tells you is, if you're doing something and you're getting the same results day after day, that's not an effective intervention. The other thing I would caution you against, and I know that it's something that those of you who have spent time in the school see, is please, please do not withhold recess from children because of behaviors. I know teachers do that all the time, but again, if you go and look, it's almost the same. It's very typically the same children sitting out every day. And so what I would tell you is if you withheld recess once and the child didn't engage in that behavior again, okay. But that's not what you tend to see. You tend to see the same children missing out over and over and over. And what that tells you again is that's not an effective intervention. And sometimes teachers will say, well, that's a natural consequence, but I would argue it's not. We all get a break during the day. If I'm not doing a good job in my job at the university, they can't take away my lunch or my break time. I still get those things. So be thinking about really making sure that what you're putting in place is based on sound judgment of what is appropriate and what works with children. I'll stress again, if you have questions, please come to me and ask or send me an email, and we will set up a time to talk to ensure that you do your very best work on this project.